Greetings. Guten Tag. Talofalava. This is Dr. Snow Brown. Catching up with my Snow King Club congregation, Snow Sheep, Snow Shepherds, and also specifically everyone that's been part of my CKCTV Facebook. Well, as you can see, I've had a haircut. Anyway, tomorrow morning I am turning up at the Hutt Valley District Court to deal with the one willful trespass charge that a lot of you already know, especially here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and known about this court appearance, for which I prepared an affidavit that I briefly shared with you all on my CKCTV Facebook. Anyway, I thought I'd just catch up with you all before I turn up to court tomorrow to deal with this one willful trespass charge. Hopefully I will get there at 10, or even before that, probably about 9. Anyway, I hope that you've all read my posting about Mr. Shadow and what the severe 3 nosebleeds mean, or the mystery behind it that have unraveled and unpacked as well as discovered today. Well, I think a lot of you out there that have suffered some form of mental illness or mental disorder in your lifetime in the last 40 odd years, you would all know the emotions and what you go through. People that suffer from bipolar disorder, you know what your symptoms are. You also know what your triggers are. The same with people that suffer from depression. That's correct. And even people that suffer from erythemania and other forms and types of mental illnesses. You all know what happens to your memory as well. Some of you will have short-term memory, or maybe not so good short-term memory, or long-term memories. That's correct. Now, I have discovered by some sheer miracle. Now, you know that my designation on Crystal Kingdom Church TV, under my private company that's owned by a royal sovereign head, is actually what? Well, it is unique, and I'm unique. And I've had a good listen to Miss Black Bitch again, or Miss Biggest Demon as I refer to in my preachings, Galen Riley, that's correct, to the video regarding the so-called the altercation or confrontation we had, a verbal confrontation or altercation we had outside of the 25th of a Golden Street property, which was about 3 properties or 4 properties, I think about 3 or 2 properties away from the facility that she manages as a manager. And of course, on the 30th of June 2022, at about 3:45 in the afternoon, I went to reserve her the trespass notice that you all know about, and that you have all witnessed the video, that's correct, about the so-called verbal confrontation and altercation we had, because she actually not only tore up the trespass notice I tried to serve back, and the letter that I tried to return, she also stuffed it in the hood of my sweater. That's correct. I didn't know that until I arrived at the Park Cozy Club sometime later on the 30th of June, that to discover to my horror that she had actually, that's right, stuffed it back in my so-called the hood, my sweater. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know how you people would kind of assess the so-called video, the altercation, the verbal confrontation, and the verbal altercation we had outside 2 properties down from the facility that she manages. I don't know how would you term that, but I can tell you right now, I'm not a juvenile delinquent, for God's sake. I am actually a meek noble, that's correct. I'm not some criminal because I don't have a long list of criminal convictions on my criminal record. To be spoken to in the most insulting manner and rude manner as well. By a manager of a rest home facility. I mean, okay, you might have all overheard me, rebutting her so-called, verbal confrontation. And I might sound, disarrayed, no, how to, disarrayed or displaced or whatnot, but you see, here's how I see it. I came peacefully to Benhaven Rest Home, which is at 29A Golden Street, Elderslie Upper Hutt. It's not far from here, from my address. And 3:45 p.m. in the afternoon, I walked into the facility that obviously anticipated, or she had anticipated, that I was going to arrive on that day to serve the trespass notice, because it looks like she was already ready for me. That's great. So the gate to the entrance of the facility was already opened. And there were 3 Māori women, and I'm presuming that they must be new staff of the facility. Anyway, I walked inside. There was probably somebody there, maybe a Pākehā or somebody else. There was a Pākehā man coming out of the office who had been speaking to Galen Riley, the manager. That's correct. Anyway, she knew I was heading in. That's correct. With the so-called to reserve the trespass notice. Of course, she became, physically, what do you call it? Not physically violent, but she became weird. Started screaming and yelling to get off the property. Oh no, you're not serving me that. That's correct. The trespass. She grabbed it and started tearing it. And of course, I did the wrong thing, which was turn my back. And all I wanted to do was just to get off the property. That's great. ASAP. So I tried to walk away, but she actually followed me very closely right behind me. I had not anticipated that she had actually torn up both the letter. I mean, she did, but I didn't know that she'd actually stuffed it in the hood of my sweater. Now, I'm not a violent person. I had filed a work grievance when I was working with her back in 2015. I was not only subjected to a verbal assault that was unprovoked and uncalled on the 15th of May, that traumatized me and also made me in tears because she threatened to call the police for no good reason. But that wasn't the end of it, you see. But I was so traumatized that day. More so that I didn't forget. That's correct. And it actually affected me that day. And I'm a very peaceful person. I might be huge and I might look, appearance like your typical, I might look very indigenous or Pacific Islander, as you can see. But I haven't an ounce of violence in me. I have never assaulted anybody in my entire life. That's correct. And I don't yell at people and scream at people unless they've done something to cross me. And on that day, she really did cross me. I've never had an employer yell and scream at me to the point where I'm actually in tears and I'm traumatized. And she's threatening to call the police for no good reason, which is a form of intimidation and bullying. That's correct. And that's what happened on the 15th of May, 2015. That woman should never have been employed in the first place. They're at Benhaven Rest Home. That's correct. Yeah, no idea. That's correct. It was the most humiliating experience ever that day. And I didn't forget. What I should have done was I should have called the police on that day to report that issue and matter, but I didn't report that till after I'd filed my grievance, probably about 2016, but it was all rather too late. That's correct. Anyway, I filed, that wasn't the end of that verbal abuse. The woman is so manipulative and really, really dangerous. That's correct. She obviously knows she's obviously an associate and is connected to these gang members that are living here inside my address. On the 30th of June, before I went to reserve her the trespass notice, what these guys have been doing a lot, which is what my rallies have been doing, because they seem to be connected. They've been doing a lot of dictating. They've been doing a lot of dictating. So before I entered Benhaven Rest Home to reserve the trespass notice, she had already been dictated to Ghislaine Riley. She had already been informed by these so-called criminals inside my address how I was coming, what, when, and how I was going to conduct my affairs in relation to the service of the notice. And of course, she would have been told, and it appears that she was connected to the KKK and also to the MMB, these people inside this address, because they're Maoris, of course. And I have discovered, so when I arrived there at the so-called workplace, that's correct. Anyway, before we continue on that, after the verbal assault where I got verbally assaulted at work on the 15th of May 2015, that wasn't the end of it. Further to that, I think she then tried to create situations at work where she was deliberately subjecting me to intimidations and also further verbal abuses, more so than any other staff, and for no good reason. That then I had no choice but to file a work grievance with the Employment Authority. Now, because I had just been subjected to a further 4 incidents of verbal abuses again. And no matter what I tried to do with this employer, it was more or less, she was trying to get me, make it difficult for me to cope at work. But she was deliberately creating a sort of wreaking havoc at work, making it difficult for me to cope. That's great. Giving me, like extra burdens of baggages that I didn't need, which was an extra 4 verbal, abuses. That's great. For no good reason. So I went and filed our first meeting or hearing was the 20th of November. There at the so-called. So that's right. And I remember I represented myself. Now the mediator who dealt with the so-called hearing, there was something not right about the mediator, being Mike Feely. That's correct. In fact, he got to hear both sides of the so-called situation, the grievance and whatnot, and the rebuttal. But as I said, she was in denial. She was in denial. Now I'm not surprised at all. And she did something. She applied a criminal harmful protocol. That's correct. What do I mean by that? Well, our meeting there on the 20th, nothing was resolved on the 20th of November. That's correct. 2015. She actually stalled the hearing deliberately. That it ended up in total, we were there for 3 hours. That's correct. And in fact, there was a breakup. We broke up, and I was told, go and have a break and whatnot. You know what? I don't know what she did, but she applied a criminal harmful protocol that actually stalled the hearing, delayed our hearing, so that it lasted 3 hours. So normally, we would have been done and dusted and resolved in under an hour. But she did something, and I'm not going to say it, but she did. And whatever she did with Mike Feely, in other words, the woman had control. She controlled our meeting. That's correct. She actually did. And only because she's a Maori in the treaty partnership. Now, I don't know what she did, but she certainly dictated to our hearing. Now, of course, I was more professional because I was handling my case. They didn't have a lawyer. Man, it was difficult dealing with her, and more so with her. That's correct. I thought to myself, I wish there was a lawyer so that we could get this. We could have gotten this meeting case resolved there and then on that day, but we had to rescheduled another day. That's correct. To have to have another hearing, because the disputes were not unresolved on that day. So that's what happened. I think this would have been the 29th of January, and that we rescheduled for a second hearing. That's correct. To have the matters resolved. But it was obvious that my case was stronger. I had a case. And that my grievances were real. They were not a figure of imagination. They were not made up either. And of course, they didn't want to. So we had another meeting. That's correct. We went back to, I remember that day I went to work. She never turned up back at work. She must have gone somewhere to do something. That's correct. Typical. Anyway, I really don't care. So we had a second meeting. Thankfully, this time they had a lawyer, James Elliott. That's correct. And of course, I represented myself. I was very professional. I was professional always from the very outset. So here it was. They had a lawyer, and I was representing myself. So we, carried out in the meeting. Everything seemed to be going really well. That's great. Minus Gayleen Riley. It was great not to have her there at the meeting at all, but to have a qualified professional lawyer to handle the situation, to handle the case. It was I don't know. For me, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. But like I said again, negotiation. We had to negotiate because they weren't prepared to pay any compensation. And also their client had denied the allegations, but she couldn't. So eventually, I guess I said to them, well, 3,500, take it or leave it. But ideally, I think it was never enough. It was never enough for the damage that she'd already done. So I signed an agreement, that's correct, where I would just, finish out work from that organization and move on with a letter of, service letter and whatnot. There was nothing to do with the residents at all, to be honest. In fact, if this matter goes to court, she's going to have no case whatsoever. She'll have no leg to stand on. Considering what's been going on over the years. Now, I served trespass notice to her because of their stalking and bullying and harassments. Every time Gayleen sees me, every time in the last so-called, maybe, say from 2015, 2016, every time I go to serve a trespass notice, she's a drama queen. She makes it difficult for me. That's correct. She verbally abuses me and starts screaming and yelling at me for no good reason. Normally the normal standards is if somebody's going to come and serve you a trespass notice, you don't show an attitude. You don't tear up a trespass notice and chuck it back at them. You just take it and say, whatever. And that's that. That's great. But for some odd reason, this woman is actually dictated to and told to behave the way that she does. That's great. And it's called a criminal harmful protocol, MMB-KK. That's great. So I finally realized that she is actually an associate of this criminal organization connected to these gang members, which is Monk Mob members living inside my address. That's correct. So the case, our so-called case at the Employment Authority, it was resolved and I won my case. And it was a great feeling to know that I'd won. That not only was able to be professional about it and have it resolved, got compensated, that's great. There was no apology because she was in denial. But at least I'd won my case. So we made an agreement and signed. That's that. And that's that. That's great. Now, for her to make all these silly, comments, calling me names and swearing at me when I'm coming to serve her a trespass notice. Nobody should ever be bullied, let alone stalked and harassed and followed outside of the facility, 2 addresses down the road, that's great, so that you could be, preached to or lectured to. When I'm a director of a company that is a very important company, I'm a royal. And people that are royal status and of noble status do not need to be spoken to like that, like we're rubbish. That's great. And that's what she did. That's what she did. Jenny belittled me, but also denigrated me in front of another staff that works at her facility. I don't know what you would call that, New Zealand. But I can tell you right now, I would never want to work with somebody, a manager like that. Can you imagine the way that she behaved on the 30th of June? When I went to serve a trespass notice? I mean, for 8 minutes, for almost 9 minutes. That's great. That's bloody torture, but it was painful. Being lectured to and being called, suddenly being called, accused of so many bullshit. That's great. And being sworn at. I was thinking, this is so unprofessional, but it's so uncool and it's so rude. There's no need for her to say any stuff. All she had to do was take the notice and shut up and go back in the facility and mind your own bizwag. That's great. But don't show an attitude like that. I've got a company. I'm a director of a private company. That's great. And I deserved deserve to be treated with respect but dignity. Even if she obviously got an issue or a problem, that's great. And it must be bipolar disorder or some mental disorder, because you just don't behave like that. Especially if I'm coming to a facility. I'm a director of a company. But if she's going to disrespect me and belittle me like that, and denigrate me in front of another staff, and they behave like hooligans, to be honest, or punks as far as I'm concerned, whichever way you term it. But it was so rude and arrogant. I mean, okay, I have a private company. It's a private ministry. I'm a sovereign head. I can do what I like inside my own Facebook. I can preach in a manner that whatever I say, that's great. But I don't expect people like her to come in and take it out of context and then misuse and abuse it. Like, this is exactly what these criminals have been doing inside my address. They have been misusing and abusing and taking it and actually torturing me, subjecting me to torture or all sorts of harms and arbitrary dictatorships, and also detriments as well. If they didn't like a comment I made about inside my church TV, it's just not normal for people to go into somebody's Facebook page and start dictating and harming them for no good reason. I'm not some gang member. I am not connected to any criminal organization. The problem is I do live in a toxic address. And I wish I had never moved here in the first place. But I don't think the so-called home invasions and unlawful entries would have stopped, or other kinds of arbitrary dictatorships. So I've discovered, as you have all seen today, when you went inside my CKCTV and saw what I posted. That's correct. If I'm a natural noble pastor, my so-called private company and my private kingdom ministry has not been patented. My idea, I know, and in fact, all my ideas, anything I have created, have value. And this is the problem with the KKK, my rally's so-called criminal connections, is that over the years, in the last 25 years, especially from 2006, they have been stealing any ideas of mine that I have been creating in private on my own digital devices. They have been downloading, copying, and stealing. And also, well, it doesn't help when there was a setup here at this address where a lot of these criminals inside this building are actually their associates. How was I supposed to know that the MMB, the Mongol mob members, are actually associates of the KKK. I didn't discover that until I moved to this address. That's correct. And this is another thing that I discovered today, was where all those decisions came from. I am actually a victim. That's correct. That I got targeted by my so-called rally's criminal connections, the MMB KKK. As you can see, there's a list of males who gave me banning decisions, all sorts of, but they all amount to arbitrary dictatorships. I'm talking about Mr. Shadow, that's correct, Mr. Willow, Mr. Matthew Palmer, who else? Mr. Henshaw. I mean, these are males, Mr. Willow, that's correct. And a lot of those decisions, you know, normal people just don't get those kind of banning decisions for no good reason. That's correct. But I suddenly realized that something must have happened to me on the 24th of June, 2003, when I was locked up overnight there at the Wellington police station, watch house, and indefinitely, today being the 27th of so-called July 2028, I got that's right, the confirmation. What the 3 nosebleeds, the severe nosebleeds, are connected to, but the mystery of it behind it. And sadly, it is so sad to have to, I mean, I don't even want to bawl my eyes out. I felt like crying, but I didn't want to waste my tears anymore, because I've been doing that in the last 25 years during my so-called depression. I'm not even going to bother. That's great. I mean, the same thing happened to me during my so-called friendship with Mr. Baker, Warren Baker. I think it's too sad. It's just too sad, I know. To have to... The only thing I want to do to Mr. Shadow and his associates, they targeted me to be studied and to be harmed on behalf of the MMB and the KKK and also my rallies. The only thing I want to do right now is get a gun and shoot all these people that dictated to my private affairs, my life, my privileges, that had sex with their criminal associates to control, but to dictate to my private affairs. That's correct. It is sad. It's so sad to have your life turned upside down like that, where you're being dictated by a bunch of commoners who have criminal connections, whom are absolute strangers. I have nothing to do with them. That's correct. But they seem to know a lot about my private business. But it's because of their jealousy, and also their criminal connections, which I wish I have nothing to do with. But it sounds like it was Mr. Prick back in 1996. That was a setup. That's correct. And also what happened in the 2001, the computer calls, where one of their members, I think the question you should be asking is, the question I'm asking right now is, why do they need to be around me? Why do they need to target me all the time to dictate to my privileges and apply their arbitrary dictatorships? I don't understand. I really can't understand. That's great. Why are Mongol mob members interested in me? That's correct. And why is the president and this so-called organization got an interest in this noble here? Remember, I'm a noble now. That's great, because I've got a kingdom. And also, hey, this is a Crystal Kingdom Church TV. These are unique intellectual property that are rare, that they ought not to be copied. But this is what the people inside this criminal organization, this address did. They downloaded and hacked into my digital device. They even dictated and damaged it. And stole. And they made copies. That's correct. I'm going to be lodging a complaint to the Chancellor, the German Chancellor. I'm German. You do know my last name is German. I could get a DNA analysis, and it would show that I could be related to King Malietoa Tanumafili, the second. Or I could be related also to, to another king, to Puta Masisi the third, or even the Mulinu or the Fiames. That's great. So there's no doubt that my mother's side, we are of royal status. We are related to the head of state, the Samoan head of state. That's great. But my German so-called noble ancestors, they're just as noble. They're part royal. They're just as noble as well. I've got nobility in my blood. I know that. I don't have to say it out loud because you can tell by the way that I walk, the way that I speak, the way that I carry myself, the way that I create my unique ideas that the people of Aotearoa seem to have stolen for your criminal connections and have not respected me for it and have not given me recognition either as per donations in that form or any other form of appreciations. Sadly, isn't it? How they seem to like taking advantage of people like yourself, like myself, nobles like myself. Where the people in New Zealand, that's correct, and that includes the elite as well, they don't mind using people like you to empower losers and commoners who have nothing. And I mean, they've got no gifts, no talents, no what? No unique ideas, that's correct. So without the ideas from nobles like myself, commoners and losers, especially ones that are criminals, that's correct, they've got nothing to spring off. They've got it's like no trampoline to jump off. That's correct. And without our preaching styles, because my preaching style is so unique, but you see, it can raise the endorphins of your intelligence. It can make you intelligent depending on how you take my preaching style, the way that God created it. That's correct. Now, I've lived here for the last 40 odd years in New Zealand, but I have never seen such arrogant, people ever on the face of this planet, but I've never seen such arrogance ever. Let alone ever experience the most racist, bigots, retards, a bunch of retards in this country, especially in this local township. I didn't deserve any of those long-banding decisions. My goodness gracious, what this is going to look like to have to go to court and deal with a one restraining order, and the judge, he's probably going to need 2 extra judges or another 5 judges to have to deal with my one restraining order. That's correct. That has all these people on it. And they're all associates and they've all been having sex. That's correct. To get me controlled somehow, whether it be psychologically or physically or something. But I mean, I thought to myself, this willful trespass charge that I'm going to be dealing with tomorrow at the courts, it definitely is sadly, it was a mistake. It is a genuine mistake. That's correct. Maybe if I had checked that, maybe if I had remembered, but I mean, I burnt the trespass notice. That's correct. But maybe if I had remembered, if I had kept a copy of it, which I didn't, when I think of it now, generally I always keep a copy. But I think at the time I didn't see I think I was too angry. That's correct. Anyway, maybe if I had a copy and I kept a record of the so-called Deborah's just trespass notice, I probably wouldn't have ended up, being charged with a willful trespass charge. But you see, the fact that I went to reserve a trespass notice because I know that I just assumed that it had run out, it had expired. That's right, the previous one. I don't expect somebody to turn around. I mean, this is just not normal. Normally, people go and serve trespass notices. That's right. And especially if the first one has run out. So I go to try and reserve this one. And I totally absent-minded, clueless, totally absent-minded, not checking first before entering the property. That's correct. That maybe the first one hadn't expired yet. Anyway, so the normal standard is it. You don't expect somebody to turn around and charge you for willful trespass charge when you came to serve them, when you came to carry out a legal obligation. I mean, a trespass notice, and now she's using it against me. That's correct. To enter a charge on my criminal record. And yes, it's been 14 years since the last time that I was charged with willful trespass charge. And now look what's happened. The courts, she is now going to abuse and misuse my official information in the courts, where, right, there is a history of willful trespass charges, but I mean, they're really not serious. Some of those willful trespass charges, they were setups, they were criminal harmful protocol setups, that's correct, out of pure jealousy, and also to defame and sabotage your good name, that's correct. But here, of course, Deborah is a tenancy manager of Kaingaora Housing New Zealand. Now, what she's going to do is take full advantage of the situation where she's going to misuse, that's correct, to give her a high self-esteem booster, to raise her so-called reputation or profile. Commoners in this country, and I'm talking, I'm saying this genuinely, brutally honest. I've got to be brutally honest. Commoners who are just commoners, like Deborah Johnson, or like the likes of Gayleen Riley, that's correct, who are not royals, who have nobility in your blood, who possibly might not have any, Bachelor of Arts or something, a degree of some sort or some qualification. Something that makes you, important, but gives you some sort of important status. You know what people like you, the sort kind of people like you should be doing when you're dealing with somebody like me? Be civil, but also don't be rude and arrogant. That's correct. Meaning, if you know somebody is above your status, why do you need to charge them, defame their good name? Let alone, retaliate via revenge that is going to go the other way. Because when I file the restraining order, well, now I'm going to place her under scrutiny. That's correct. How she has been conducting her affairs in dealing with me. So it's all very nice. That's great for people to think, oh, well, this is a great opportunity for me to get back at that person. And also to defame their good name and destroy their reputation. And also to enter a criminal charge on their criminal record when their criminal record is clean. That's correct. So why do you want to do that for? And then, of course, what would happen if I've got a right to retaliate? I've got a right to file a restraining order. But to also scrutinize and also to question her behavior, that's great, and how she been conducting her affairs in dealing with me as a client of so-called Kaingaora Housing New Zealand, and how she's been conducting herself and behaving also, very incriminating. That's great. So, I know. Now, I hope she's able to take, the criticism that's going to, not criticism, but what's going to come on the order about her behavior. That she could easily be charged as well. The problem with me is because of the fact that somebody had committed some criminal offense against your person that is connected to your rallies, they decided that they would bring in Mr. Willow and have you set up. That's correct. Give you order supervision. Sonny, you've got a history of willful trespass. That's correct. Despite your criminal record was clean for 7 years, I had to get a clean slate, which you did. You did. You managed to earn a clean slate. That's correct. But you see how they use Mr. Willow's so-called order of supervision and other professional people to diagnose you with a mental disorder that is the wrong thing to do, but it was more or less to serve their selfish outcomes, which was to cover up the so-called sexual assault, but by an official the police officer, that's correct, who was on duty on the 24th of June 2003, and who has now been who's been doing a lot of arbitrary dictatorships. But you know, that outcome, whatever he did, because I'm sorry, but he did. Why would I have a nosebleed? Severe unexplained nosebleed, that's correct. Where I'm actually being tortured, Given something like a drug to induce it. I mean, not exactly. We all know there are women that go to the hospital who are in labor. And I guess the illustration I'm trying to illustrate is the word induced. There's such a thing as called induced labor. Now, if they have technology like that to make you, have a baby, that's correct, then I'm sure they got the same kind of technology. And I'm talking about KKK and every other gang organization, MNB, here in this country, that I'm sure you have also. You know exactly how to make someone have a nosebleed that is so severe that they are spewing sort of blood clots. It's almost like a period out of their mouth and their nose, that's correct. And they don't know what happened. Nobody does, but it looks like it's an experiment, but it's actually torture. And the cruel thing about it is that they actually know that it's torture what's happening. And the hospital is just as guilty of treason as the fact that they actually condone and aid and abet, they actually encourage the so-called KKK and the MNB, the people that are involved that actually cause the nosebleed to take place, that's correct. They are actually guilty because they know, well, I mean, if you do a blood test, it shouldn't come normal. But you see, like I said, the hospital staff and even the paramedics, they seem to cover it up because they are associates. Now, I don't know what you would call that, but there's tyranny and corruption in the system. New Zealand, this is why New Zealand is so guilty. And they got 6 years to turn this around, but it's too late now. Because when I file my complaint with the German Chancellor, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for 1,000 Nazi soldiers to come and take out my enemies and give them the bullet to the head. You see how I'm wearing a cap? I'm wearing a cap turned the other way, to turn this way. And I know that during my ministry, it has a meaning. And when a Nazi soldier comes to give you a bullet to your head, it's because I'm a sovereign head. I'm a head of state of Crystal Kingdom Church TV. That means I must be a king. A meek German king that's part indigenous, and I am. Now, am I dreaming? No, because when the German Chancellor reads all my PDFs, which I'll be sending soon, before I go out to the court tomorrow, I'm going to send it to the German Chancellor. And I'll tell him exactly what I want right now. I want to be free from arbitrary dictatorships, from all these evils, from the people of Aotearoa and the people of New Zealand in the form of KKK MNB or MNB KKK. I want to be free to do whatever I want without being dictated to and being controlled and being tortured and being, disciplined in some form or another. I mean, I've got to only look at all those long-standing decisions, and they all seem to be about disciplining you. They're trying to discipline you, just like with that black bitch, Gayleen Riley there at the so-called, Benhaven Rest Home. I don't know where these people came from, where they had the idea that they could be so excessive and extreme in their form of discipline and in all these reprimands and all these controls. And yet none of my rallies are ever given such decisions, such tortures and cruelties decisions that actually, these are arbitrary, decisions that actually amount to tortures and cruelties. And also criminal stalkings, but also defamation, because it does defame your good name. I don't understand. I really don't understand. Where did I come in? It's great. Where these all these bunch of, strangers come from? And who gave them these privileges that are actually criminal? When I think about Sergeant so-called Candy, and her attitude, she's so bloody ignorant. She's just like the rest of the Kiwis, the rest of the locals here in this local township. They're so bloody racist, arrogant, and ignorant. That's correct. And they undermined you, and they sure do undermine you, especially Sergeant Candy. They're not only jealous of your trespass notices because they're unique, they're also jealous of your private company, which is actually a private monarch as well, Crystal Kingdom Church TV. They are jealous of your so-called label, or Dr. Snow Brown or knighthood. But they seem to also, because how do I know that they're jealous? Well, they don't give you a donation. If they were genuinely, supportive, and if they had anything such as called aroha, I don't think so, they would have given you a donation by now. That's correct. But because of their jealousy, and they're so hard up about their so-called treaty rights and treaty partnership, the loyalty, isn't it? That's correct. They decided they teach you lessons. I mean, the constant, internet teaching lessons of you. There's no doubt. I've got more evidence to prove that I'm definitely a victim of torture here at this address. And in the last 25 years. And it's just appalling and disgusting that the government of New Zealand actually allows such people to prosper. And also to get away and cover up their so-called criminal offences. That's great, against your person. But I mean, you're a full royal. Again, they're jealous. Because of their jealousy, anything to do with your last name, that's great. They don't do any of it. What confuses the hell out of me is that they don't give any of those evils to any of my rallies. Not even my other 6 siblings. Maybe because Awhatia Baker favors your other 6 siblings, especially your second sister, more so than you. That's correct. Maybe your dad's so-called brothers. Well, I know that Mr. and Mrs. Yoke, they actually do favor my cousin. In fact, all of my dad's brothers, my dad's aunts as well, they seem to favor, but more so your dad's side of the family, they seem to favor your cousin, that's great, Amanda Baker, a lot. See how they controlled your life through other people and their criminal associates? I can't believe it that your rallies, I know, they can't handle seeing you marrying a Pākehā, let alone having children, because it would mean that, well, you're going to have royal children. I hear, that's correct. And I bet you they couldn't handle the fact that one day you would be a king, because, well, naturally, you see, my mother is a full royal, my dad is a part royal, but what they didn't know was that my mother's father's mother could be a full royal. That's correct. So meaning, two monarchs, one on my grandfather's side and one on his so-called mother's side. That's correct. And this is probably why my baby monarch was born the way that it did. It's meek. It's childlike. But they can't handle. So what do? They try and destroy and damage. I know. Instead of respecting you and protecting you and even, supporting you, they did totally the opposite. They all did totally the opposite. They belittled you. They made fun of you. They mocked you. That's correct. They even undermined you. Incredible, I know. And yet they don't mind, and yet they can't stop coming into my kingdom. I wonder why. I mean, people that have committed treasons, I mean, if you're not going to even give me a donation, why do you need to enter my kingdom? Why do you even need to read my so-called postings or my preachings? Yeah, what's so fascinating? Why are you so interested to come in? And yet you don't want to respect me. It's so weird and crazy how New Zealand thinks that I'm the one who's crazy when they're the ones who are crazy and disrespectful and rude and arrogant. I know. And they just don't seem to understand you. But more so acceptance. They just don't seem to respect you and accept you just as you are. Maybe the German Chancellor might have a different opinion or perspective on this case of yours. But when I think about Sergeant Candy, the fact that you ended up having a one willful trespass charge entered onto your criminal record that is a clean criminal record. It's been like that for the last 14 years. It seems ridiculous and ludicrous, I know. But the fact that I'm going to have to say, I actually blame Sergeant Candy, the local sergeant of the police, the local police station, my local Upper Hutt police station, for what? For this one willful trespass charge? How did I come to such a, conclusion? Well, it's the fact that she refused when I approached her local police station, initially on the 20th of May, with my 18 trespass notice that I wanted to serve. That's correct. I wanted her police officers or somebody from her station to serve them. She said, well, we don't have the resources, meaning, you'll have to serve your own trespass notices, or you got the option of serving it via the so-called registered post. Would you believe that? So maybe if she had served my Deborah Johnson's trespass notice that I tried to serve, that I taped on her door, that I had to enter her property, maybe I wouldn't have to deal with a one willful trespass charge on my criminal record like 14 years later. That's correct. No, I honestly blame Sergeant Candy for the commission of this charge. That's correct. They caused this charge on my criminal record. If she had served my trespass notice, I wouldn't be charged with a one willful trespass charge. That's correct. I wouldn't even need to enter the property that belongs to Deborah Johnson. In fact, it wouldn't even be an issue for the presiding judge that I have to deal with tomorrow. That's correct. Remember, it's the sergeant's job, but it's her call. She made the wrong call. I didn't make the wrong call. That's correct. I needed to go onto the property to protect my own self. That's correct. For my own protection. That it will be sorted there on the restraining order. That's correct. And it would make sense. And it will be totally relevant. In fact, they now owe you compensation and apologies because I'm a director of a very, very unique, but also very important, very popular company. That's correct. That is a ministry and also a private monarch. And look what I'm having to deal with. One frivolous, silly, petty, one willful trespass charge that didn't even need to be entered. That's correct. Onto my criminal record, but because of the jealousy and the hatred and whatnot, instead of understanding and being civil, because after all, I'm a New Zealand citizen. I've been here the last 40 odd years. Man, I feel like I just got off the boat or off the plane somewhere. I feel like an alien in this country. But I mean, okay, I understand that they don't like the way I run my church TV, my intellectual property. Hey, I own my intellectual property. I even took the initiative to register it. You people out there have no idea, how much energy and time and effort, but even, the kind of knowledge that you have to do to create something like that, it doesn't just fall from the sky. It doesn't just appear, abracadabra one day. Those are years. I've had like 25 years of trying to create, to come to that kind of blessing. Blessings like that are so rare. Now, if you want to deny me my privileges as a noble, my nobility and the rest of it, my God, New Zealand, you can't do that. You cannot do that if I'm a New Zealand citizen. I can deny your treaty document because my private intellectual property is a ministry. It's Christian based, and I also, I'm more or less to do with the will of God, but it's my private monarch. I can do what I like and say what I like in my own Facebook. But for you to come in and take it out of context, like Gayleen Riley, like that silly woman, that's correct. And think you can lecture to me and tell me, the director, how to conduct my affairs? Hey, I'm 49 going on 50. My God, I can just imagine it's just as well you never had children. Why would I want to have children if they're going to be controlled like the way that they've been controlling you? My gosh, my poor teenagers, they'd have no life. They'd be stalked. They'd have their stuff stolen. They would be arrested for all sorts of petty, ridiculous nonsense. False accusations, that's great. Premeditated, but fabricated. Nonsense, that's correct. My God, thank God I didn't marry a Kiwi either. I can just imagine what would happen to my husband. Man, it would be a headache all the time. He would be, either drugged or poisoned, or he'd have something like, something went wrong at work. Yeah, what happened, honey? Who is it now this time? I don't know, some prick tried to like that stupid mad woman, that's correct. I don't know what happened. Yeah, it sounds like it's arbitrary dictatorships from a criminal organization. That's what it is. I can't wait to leave your country, New Zealand. But like I said, you got 6 years to turn this around. But right now, all I want to do is take out the troublemakers. I want to be free. I want to be able to enjoy as a noble, but as a full bloody royal. My privileges as a Kiwi. I've been here most of my life. I came here when I was 10 years old. But if you think then I'm just going to let you, that's right, walk all over me and dish out the wrath to me and, control my privileges, control my life through some arrogant prick because he stole something that didn't belong to him. You got to be joking. You guys are going to get the Nazi soldiers. And this is not a joke either. I need to live, but I need to be happy. I can't be happy if you people are controlling my privileges, controlling my bloody life through other criminals and other commoners when I'm 49, 50, for God's sake. You shouldn't be hacking into my digital devices. You shouldn't be dictating to my privileges. I've got a right to be happy. And I've got a right to express my opinions the way that I want to express it. That's correct. But you can't control me like this, New Zealand. Especially the locals. I gotta enjoy myself at the Cozy Club. Next thing you know, I've got some idiot, some arsehole, yelling and screaming at me. I'm thinking, Gene, you got a wife, but I want you to shut your big mouth right now because I ain't your wife and you got no fucking right to scream and yell at me. That's correct. I got a right to enjoy myself. Next thing you know, you'd already been banned. And why did they decline your application? I mean, after you complied with their so-called stupid, petty, lying decision of 5 years banning and 2-year trespass notice, that's correct, where you actually complied with it, but then, of course, you got tortured and taught lessons inside this address by their associates here. That's correct, for no good reason. Why do they need to decline your application if, again, it's the jealousy. Again, it's the jealousy. I don't know when this is going to stop the controlling, the arbitrary dictatorships and the controls. Oh my God, if this is how it's going to be, it's just as well I'm not the sovereign head of this country. But like I said, I am taking out my enemies. I have had enough. I mean, can you imagine? Thank God I'm not a gang member. And I'm not part of, but I can understand why people will be tempted to create their own gangs in this country. Let alone, especially in this local township. Why did they would turn around and say, you know what? I've had enough. I'm going to just, I may as well say, well, you can be the president of your own gang, yeah. Is it the Thumbs Up gang? Or is it the Butthole gang? Or is it the Fed Up gang? You know what I'm talking about? No, you all know damn well what I'm talking about. You know how I don't blame people out there who get fed up, who've had enough of the nonsense and the bullshit and the baggages and the burdens that they have to put up with. Every year they get targeted for no good reason. I don't blame myself if all of a sudden I decide, you know what? I'm going to kill those 18 people and get their heads. For my God, that's great, because they deserve it, all right? And I know how to get a gun, and I know how to break into the so-called any trucks and cars, things you know. I mean, it took me two days to serve those trespass notice. Do you believe that? 18 of them. The other two, of course, it only took 1 day to serve it. That's great. I guess what I'm saying, New Zealand, is you people better what? You better change your attitude. That's correct. You better take back all this rubbish that I've been getting, because I'm tempted. I don't blame myself saying, you know what? Fuck all. That's correct. Can you imagine if I decide to kill, in effect, I've got immunity. It's a sovereign head. There's a noble. I can kill anyone if I wanted to. That's correct. Do you think I couldn't carry out the so-called 18 hits? Are you undermining me? Can you imagine if I turn around and become a president? Oh, you wouldn't want to see that, New Zealand. That's correct. I would cover the whole of your country. I wouldn't cover the whole of your country. I wouldn't even bother filing my asylum application if I wanted to teach you all a lesson. That's great for the next 6 years. But I mean, well, my Lord is saying, you know what? It's not time. It's not time. That's correct. But what my Lord really wants right now is the 18 heads. Is the 18 heads. But he wants my enemies to be buried. That's great. The guardian angel has had enough. In fact, he's saying, you know what? Send the stuff to Chancellor German. The German Chancellor. And so that they can deploy reinforcements to take them out, to put them out of their misery. You've put up with enough. You've put up with enough. That's correct. Because it's time to take them out. Well, I mean, when Mr. Shadow, man, nobody should ever, rape you. Whether it be 2 times, 3 times, during a lockup. Nobody should ever do that to you. That's correct. Steal your honor and your dignity, let alone your virginity. I know. I mean, I just discovered that, oh my God, I know. I felt like crying on the inside. I suddenly realized what had happened. I don't even want to talk about it, but I mean, I don't need counseling at all. I just need to take out the son of a bitch. That's correct. Is there anyone bold out there to go and kill all my enemies? That's correct. Put a stop to them? I didn't think so either. I suddenly realized that forgiving people like that is a waste of time. You can't, as a reborn snow shepherds, I'll be very frank right now, there is no forgiveness. If somebody rapes you like that, like violently, that's correct. Then the death penalty is what is needed. especially if I'm a sovereign head or a noble. Royals have rights, just like with Queen Elizabeth. If you have a private monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, back in the so-called convention for nobles back in the days, was execution. It was always, the severed head on the platter, or the severed head. That's right, chop the head off. And that is my right, and that is my right as a noble. Death penalty. That's great. So the guardian angel is saying he's had enough. He said, you know what? Enough of that. They need to be put to death. They need to be put to death. That's correct, is what he's saying. Because the tortures and the harms are not going to end for you. And in fact, the safety of your immediate family is so important, is so important. But as a director of a company, you shouldn't have to put up with any of those sort of nonsense that you've been trying to put up with, let alone trying to overcome, try to conquer, and try to climb the mountain for. That's correct. You should be able to do whatever you want in this township and in this country without some prick or some arrogant son of a bitch trying to dictate and control you. What do they need to do that for? That's correct. Do you know that there's over 70 gangs in New Zealand where there is a president? That's correct. And you guys are committing the most heinous crimes. It's ongoing right now. And you never ever stalk them. That's correct. They just let them, commit the crimes. That's correct. Which might be rape, which might be, the most heinous crimes. They let them do what they like. That's great. And here it is when it comes to you. They're stalking you. They're spying you. They're reporting you to Mr. Willow or Mr. Shadow. That's great. Or even to Mr. Brick. And dictating to you. But you're a noble. You're way above their classes and their statuses. You're first class German as well. That's great. It's Right Honourable Chancellor would understand what your status is, why it's so important for Germans to be left alone, but to be respected also. I mean, you got 800,000 of your people. I'm a German. I'm not Maori. And I'm not a coconut either. That's correct. But they have the nerve to undermine you. What would happen if I turn around now and say I'm now a president of a Christian of a Christian monarch? Well, I have got every right to say, but I'm not a president. I'm actually a natural noble pastor. Thank God. That's correct. So everything I say in my church TV, they're all illustrations. But the one that I'm talking about, the 1,000 Nazi soldiers, that I'm serious about that. Where I need the 18 heads right now, and I need to take out all my enemies now with a bullet to the head. No. That's for real. Because I can do it personally. Because I got immunity to. It's just a good thing. You guys are lucky I'm not a president. That's correct. I got every right now when you consider, oh my God, look at all the so-called harms and the tortures. That is so cruel. That is beyond cruelty. It is so extreme and excessive. That's great. But it's not necessary either. Why was it necessary for them to give you those decisions? Let them control you like that. Like you're some idiot. You're not an idiot. Now they're going to get it. Are they prepared to take a bullet to the head? Because I can tell you right now, from where I'm sitting and where I'm taking it in, you people that have been harming this person and dictating, controlling, you need to be put to death. The guardian angel, that's correct, and Archangel Warren have already said it. Man, once you cross the line, there's a fine line. There's only so much you can cross, that's correct. But once a police officer like that decides to do what he did on behalf of the people of Aotearoa, New Zealand, on behalf of the so-called Maoris or Maoris, you've crossed the wrong Pākehā. Now you've really done it, New Zealand. That's correct. Now you've really done it. Right? So welcome to the real world. Welcome. That's correct. In 6 years' time, accept the challenge. Accept the challenge. Because do you know what's going to happen? when there's war. I mean, America experienced civil war all the time during the 400 years of so-called slavery. But like I'm saying right now, can you understand now why my Lord is coming down for the second time? I can understand now why. In fact, I know what my mission is. I know why I was created, and I know why I was born. That's correct. And it's because, that's correct. There's been so many Christians over the years that have been dealt to. But when there's 800,000 people of the so-called marriage in this country, you guys have been allowed it to prosper. That's correct. Even evil, your people that are evil, even your people that are obnoxious weeds and are Draculas and are so evil, like in my case, in dealing with you. That's correct, the toxic ones. The government of New Zealand, because of your treaty partnership and the rest of it, and also the fact that the Pākehās respect you, because you satisfy them sexually and you give them, what they ask you to do or tell you to do. You guys are prospered. You guys are prospered. That's right. See how the government of New Zealand even gives 2.5 million to a criminal organization, to a Mongomon member organization. And here's you. I know. Throughout my ministry, I haven't seen not one dime, not even $1. Not even a slice of bread. Let's just be realistic. Not even a cup of tea. That's correct. And it's probably because they're all scared of the 800,000 Maoris, plus plus their supporters, plus the racist white niggers. That's great. They're too scared. If I gave you $10, I'm gonna get it. Yeah, I know you would. If I gave you $1,000, you would get it. Yeah, you would. I'd kill you. Why is that? Is it jealousy or what? Do you know there's 800,000 of them? I've never heard of an indigenous group of people in the South Pacific that has prospered that much in such a short time. Now, it has been over 180 years. I think the reason why they prospered even more was because of this one. This noble and my rules and my play. That's correct. And even my kingdom. That's correct. I've never seen that kind of turnaround. That's right. So if I were you now, people of Aotearoa, New Zealand, you guys are guilty of treasons. So you've been banned from my church TV. That's correct. So you shouldn't access it or use it. In fact, I know that a lot of you don't like it. So for that reason, I would rather deal with just my friends on Facebook. And that is just to meet my needs as a noble. That's correct. The rest of you that are not nobles, don't enter. Because right about now, like I said, the only thing I want to do to my enemies at the moment is to take them out, but put you out of your misery. Bang. That's correct. Put a bullet to your head. And so it should have been done ages ago. That's correct. Do you think I don't know that Sergeant Candy favors the criminals inside this address more so than this noble that has been, transforming not only the people here in this your fucking country, I've been transforming you through my ministry, haven't I? More so, that's correct. How do I know that? Well, she wouldn't fucking serve any of my trespass notices that I tried to serve. That's correct. Get her served. You know that? Do you think I'm going to give a damn what she thinks? No, I'm not. Because at the end of the day, those 1,000 Nazi soldiers come to take you out, like you should. Otherwise, I could do it myself with the whole lot of my knights and chiefs. That's correct. She won't be what? Will she be able to? That's correct. Will she be able to handle just seeing them drop like flies? Hey, you guys have been killing a lot of Christians and even people that I knew. Yeah, you've been doing a lot of that. You've been getting, but they've allowed you to kill them. That's correct. Now, what's the difference now? If we go all out war, that's correct. Because of your stupid evil treaty partnership. Your favoritism and prejudice, that's correct. You're bigots. There are people out here that deserve what you people are getting. And what you people are dishing out. Man, they deserve their penalty. The guardian angel is saying, take them out now. They deserve it. They really do. And they really need to be taught a lesson. They've been teaching you lessons after lessons, but you've never had the opportunity to teach them lessons back. That's correct. So my 3-day war, that's my opportunity. That's my time. That's correct. But you got the nerve to think I haven't got the right to do the same to all of you? And yet you've been doing a lot. To you, that's great. And even to my daddy. To my immediate family. They're so rude and arrogant. And why is that? Why you've become so greedy and so arrogant? And you know what? I'll tell you one thing. The only reason why you people show off a lot and don't seem to give an F about everybody else, like the attitude of that bitch of a woman, that bitch of a black ass there at the Ben Haven rest home, is because you people, that's correct, it's because you got the backing and the support of the elite, but the crown and also of Pākehās that you fucked the shit out of. That's correct. And I mean, fuck the hell out of it. That's correct. And about the and you don't mind being sex slaves. You don't mind being going to jailbird, as long as those nice Pākehās fuck the shit out of you. You don't mind being their slaves, don't you? No, you don't mind. That's correct. Except the difference between you people and myself is that I don't give a fuck either. About any nice-looking Pākehās, especially some cop, some bad cop or police officer in your country that looks so handsome. Oh my God. Do you think I would give a damn? No, I wouldn't. I'd rather have my God, that's correct, my kingdom, everything that God has given me through the guardian angel and the archangel Warren, than some prick, than some dumbass. That's correct. And when my Lord come down for the second time, he's got no case. He's got no case closed. Treasons, bang. Treasons, zoom. Treason, zoom. That's correct. I mean, I've given so many warnings. That's correct. Poor Noah. I know they laughed at Noah. You know what? You can keep on laughing at me, because that's fine. But you won't laugh anymore when you see the Nazi soldiers come. Sadly. But I cannot wait to leave your country, so that you can stop dictating to me. That's correct. And stop, being so jealous of me. And stop stealing as well. That's correct. And stop controlling other people's so-called privileges in their lives as well. You people have gotten so powerful in numbers, 800,000 of you and whatnot. And it's because, the Pākehās have been so nice to you, so kind. That too kind and too nice. But only because you know what the Pākehās weakness is. So you work that to your advantage, don't you? That's correct. They all know that the Pākehās weakness is sex. The sex demon. And something else as well. And also prestige and respect. That's correct. And if what you do, Maori people, respects the Pākehā and gives them prestige and whatnot, then they're always going to be nice to you. And you will always prosper. So as long as you have an agreement and you do what they tell you to do, you will continue to prosper and be fruitful and be great and be powerful. But at the end of the day, when our Lord comes down for the second time, just be ready that there won't be that many of you left anymore when he comes down to do the job, to get the job done. Really done. Thank you for this rare opportunity to catch up with you all. And of course, don't mind my preaching, because it's my style of preaching. I'm not trying to be a Genghis Khan, and I never do. I never try to be anybody else but myself. That's correct. It's a good thing. You know what? Soak it up. While I'm still here in your country, soak it up. Make the most of the opportunity you've got. Because when I leave your country, you're going to see something that you never ever wanted to see, eh? That's right. Never. Oh, I might, be outspoken, express myself in the manner that I do, but don't forget I'm a German. That's correct. Which a lot of you are not. So you wouldn't understand what I'm talking about. But don't ever think that I do intimidating. I mean, they must think that everything that I do on my church TV, that I actually deliberately do that to intimidate people, to scare people. No. I just am. I don't do anything to intimidate and scare the shit out of people. I just am very intimidating, and I am just scary, and I am just that kind of person. I'm just a German, that's correct. And I'm just trying to be myself. But if somebody's going to misinterpret what I say and do, well, that ain't my problem. That's correct. That's not my problem. But just be careful who you cross. That's correct. Because the person that you might undermine and think, oh, she's just a nothing, or she's just dreaming, might actually turn out to be far more greater and way above your classes than the so-called people that you know here locally or in this country, or even the Prime Minister. I might actually be way above the Prime Minister, which I am, and way above the Māori King, which I am, and you actually qualify when you consider. That's right. So, I come from a very good family, but I tell you right now, my monarch that is so meek at the moment will be far greater than any monarch on this planet. That's great, because it's off the ground. It's sort of hanging there somewhere in the sky, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, you all have a very nice evening, morning, and it's been lovely catching up with you all. And don't mind me, my screaming and yelling, because as long as I don't kill somebody, literally, it should be okay. But don't be scared. When you see the Nazi soldiers, remember this. That's the will of God. That's the will of God. That's correct. I have a guy named Angel. And when he knows when it's time, when things happen, it's because that's the will of God. So don't ever be afraid. If something happens, just be ready. That's correct. If it comes, it has to take place, and it has to happen that way. So don't lose faith. So people that are non-Christians, that are scaredy cats and are cowards, I'm afraid that's not going to be a problem for me. That ain't my problem. I guess that's what my preaching is about, really, is to get you ready. But, if you're not in agreement with me and you don't appreciate what I do, then maybe you ought not to enter my kingdom anymore. It's time for you to move on, and say goodbye. That's correct. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.